Yes, thank you, Albert, for the kind introduction. First, let me say perhaps a few general words. It's a pleasure to have a Rema conference here at Worms and with Via Medieval. We are very lucky to have hosted this conference, and also that we can give you this time a little bit of a medieval flavor to Rema. And it was also nice as we could, actually in a Skype interview, we managed with Albert and Adele to set up this conference, and we suggested, came to the idea to take up the topic of the Middle Ages or the medieval times and to name it Quo Vadis, so a little bit an outlook of, because it's also a question for me and all the persons here, where will it lead or where will it go? Before I start, I would also like to say a few remarks on the concert yesterday, because it was named several times in the talk from Ben, and I would have liked to say something, but we had to eat. So I thought I will say only this before that first, because Ben asked, probably had only 2 hours to rehearse. I have to say, not to blame the organizers here. We were in a very lucky positions, because yesterday, on Thursday evening, we really had from 6 o'clock, as long as we wanted, the whole cathedral for us. So it was really, but that's really an exception, I have to say. Yeah. Normally you arrive and then you have 2 hours to rehearse. The second thing is that, of course, we are not monks, and we don't want to do a theater. Nevertheless, we try to incorporate into performance some spatial movements or behaviors, because we have found out that not simply staying in front and singing to the audience by representing a liturgical action helps also the singers very much to remember the concert sequence. Standing, sitting, bowing, and so this helps very much. It's not only to make a show, but it helps and also it reinforces what Richard Lobert said, the perception of ritual gesture. And the second thing is, because it is my own, I coined it a hardcore performance because it was rather long, but as mentioned, it was only the night responsories. We left out all the lections, the lessons, and all the antiphons in all the psalms, because a solemn night office would have in Cluny up to 3 to 4 hours in the night. But we realized when we did performances in the former time, when we shortened the concert length, it is also, we damage the result. Because as Ben said, if there is a certain point you have to reach in time to get in this mood of, you named it, letting it go. If you shorten it, you probably can't reach it, and people have not this experience. And we made the experience that often concert organizers tells us, this is not too long, it's not too difficult for our audience, and so say. But I always say, dare to do it, because in the end we have very good responses of the audience saying, we came in this mood to get in a rhythm. And for us and for the singers, the main experience is that of a kind of rhythmic experience, to be in this rhythm of, if the lessons are there, even of hearing, responding by singing, hearing, and so on. And that's very important. So, and I'm very lucky that and grateful that Via Medieval offered us this format, this XL format. Of course, we have other formats. Next week we will be in Bingen in a new festival, Musica Antiqua Bingen, and we will perform a 70 minutes condensed version of it, because not every organizer has this time. This brings me now to my talk I wanted to speak about now. which is something which I am dealing with as a performer, always thinking about even more about the role of space. If you come to, of course, to a performing venue, you have to take, if you make a program with liturgical music, the church which is there. You can't alter the church. But thinking about this, I'm more and more thinking about how the performance space in liturgical music, the churches, the role as being also an historical instrument, which has to be thought of. It's not the same thing if I'm singing in a Baroque church or in a Romanesque, like the Cathedral of Worms. And the second thing is then what to do if the space is not longer there. And that's my topic. And to be not misunderstood, it's not that I'm now promoting that every concert has to go in this direction. It's just a thinking of the future maybe we will have and what could be done. It's still an experiment also. And it started with a so-called Exploration Full Fund, it is called, Sacred Sound, Sacred Space, at Tübingen University, which explores the musical manifestations of the sacred between theory and practice in an interdisciplinary approach. This is the website if you want to look at that more deeply on the University of Tübingen. One of its sub-projects investigates the interacting of sacred spaces with sound and the relations between concepts of sacred space and their socio-cultural construction and religious experience. Such complex systems of relations are particularly demanding if sacred buildings don't exist anymore, or at least not in their original form. New approaches of research for this question are provided by recently defined methods of virtual reconstruction of historical acoustics. The research project wants to reconstruct churches of the past through virtual models and resurrect their special acoustic environments with the technical resources of digital humanities. It will also explore the contextualization of liturgical singing in its original sound space, in particular in the Middle Ages. We expect that, for example, so that's the basic theory behind it, chant as a sacred sound was embedded in a complex system of relations between movement within sacred space during the liturgy and the acoustical characteristics of the space. As a result, we are looking and hoping for new insights into the shaping parameters for transmission, notation and performance practice of liturgical music. As an example, fragments of chant manuscripts have been already recorded with my ensemble Ordo Virtutum for medieval music, and in collaboration with the Southwestern Radio, with Annette Sido-Ingenhoff, who is here today, at the sacred spaces where they originated from. As for example, as you see here on the slide, the former monastery churches of Bebenhausen, Maulbronn, Hirsau, Salem and Alpirsbach. These, only Salem was continued as a monastery. The others were given up during the introduction of the Reformation. And you can see it clearly because those buildings remained in their original medieval form. The others in the Lake of Constance area, they continued and they undertook from medieval eyes to a disadvantage a Baroque development. And they only were given up in the 19th century. The recording, Fragmentum, which you see on the left side, has been released as a super audio CD in 2017, and we also presented it in concert, for example, at the Utrecht Festival in the same year. Recording in the original space was not possible for the no longer existing monastic church of St. Peter and Paul at Hirsau, for example, in the Black Forest. In the 12th century, one of the biggest churches north of the Alps, a little bit smaller than the Cathedral of Worms, but nearly. destroyed in the 17th century and today only preserved in a few remnants. Virtual reconstructions of these churches shall help to reveal the character of their acoustics, which will be tested in virtual simulation rooms and compared with historical records, as for example Libri Ordinarii and so on. Since the 1990s, computer-aided methods are well established in acoustic research as well as the rendering of data into audible sound, which is called oralization. Still lacking are investigations into the relations between acoustic of space and liturgical rituals performed within them. One of our cooperation partners in this project, this is the Institute for Technical Acoustics of Aachen University, provides technical means to set up a simulator with oralization. Complete simulation of room acoustics, oralization, and 3D audio reproduction are possible. The institute is one of the leading centers for oralization technology. A case study on the acoustical reconstruction of an 11th century church in Spain has already been carried out by the team at Aachen in 2013. You see here an example of such a reconstructed church. Our Sacred Space project now started as a first step with the UNESCO World Heritage Cistercian Monastery Church of Maulbronn in southwestern Germany, one of the best preserved churches of its kind. Here you see the interior. A 3D laser scan of the church has been performed this spring by the Technische Hochschule Karlsruhe, another of our cooperation partners. And I just received the result of this, and I wanted to show it if it works out. This is the result of the measurement they did of the 3D laser scan of the Church of Maulbronn, which is an interactive model which you can now move around and get visual impact of this is so-called point cloud, which is not a very good picture of it, but it is enough for the acoustic reproduction, and you can zoom in and all the things and turn it around. In this August now, we recorded the office for St. Bernhard of Clairvaux of the 12th. Here you see on the next slide how they did it with this 3 laser scan. And this was the result, we already saw. And the recording was the Bernhard office out with my ensemble, 7 singers in the church, again in collaboration with the SWR, Südwestrundfunk. This is a manuscript of Maulbronn itself, where the office was written. This was the recording with my ensemble, and you heard it yesterday in the second part, the Citeaux part. In parallel, the real acoustic of the church was measured by the team of Aachen. They made their measurement with such funny-looking microphones, like this ball here, round microphone. And this is a so-called virtual listener who was positioned in the lay brother choir to imitate someone being there on the other side of the lectern, because it is divided. Selected pieces of the music will then be recorded, this will be next year, by the singers in an anechoic chamber at Aachen University with 32 microphones array, giving the singers the oralization of the sound of the church in real time. Oh, that's another point cloud. And now that's the, this is not from the experiment with the Spanish churches. They will hear, the singers, the sound of their own voices in the virtual acoustics environment via headphones. Then both recordings we plan to compare in order, the real recording in Maulbronn and the virtual recording, to calibrate our results, because it is still an experimental stage. We will also replace, or we want to replace, in the 3D model of Maulbronn, the vaulted ceiling of Maulbronn Church, which you have seen on the picture maybe. It has the only, what has been transformed is the ceiling, because in the original state it was a flat wooden ceiling, and now it is a Gothic vaulted ceiling. And we want to hear how much this affects the acoustic. The singers will also perform in the so-called X-Cave space at Aachen University. Here you see this space, which is the biggest 5-side virtual acoustic immersion room of Europe. There it will be possible to test various positions of singing in the virtual model and its results on the acoustics. So this is the room, and you already see here someone in there with classes, 3D classes, and a 3D joystick to navigate. And there's another picture of this X-Cave with the projection of the Spanish church and a user in the virtual room. We think that both levels are equally important, so that the singers act optically and acoustically as close as possible as if they were in the original environment. We hope, as a result, to be able to describe the connection between, for example, Cistercian chant and chant reform, theology, and acoustics, where we think of that this is connected very tightly. If the experiment is successful in our eyes and ears, we plan in 2020, next year, a recording of the offices for St. Gall and St. Ottmar in a virtually reconstructed model of the former, now not preserved, monastery church of St. Gall with its virtual acoustic. So from St. Gall there is nothing left, so here you have to rebuild from scratch a virtual reconstruction. This is from the famous monastery plan, but this was never built because this was an ideal plan, but there was a church built by the Abbot Gottsbert, and this can be also reconstructed from findings from remnants which were found in by looking in what was delivered. In the future, we also intend to do recordings for Cluny, where you heard the first part yesterday, in the concert with the Transfiguratio, which is in fact the Transfiguratio, to say also, because Richard mentioned this, that's really, the story tells not very much. It's not a big story, because Transfiguratio is it's only one picture. Jesus looking and looking in heaven and being white like snow. And all the texts go always around this picture. So it's not very big story, but it's also a meditation, always getting deeper in this miracle of the Transfiguration. And yesterday, this was also an attempt to simulate a little bit in two different acoustical regions of the cathedral, the different acoustic experience we expect from a Cistercian church and from Cluny. Of course, this is not the real, because Worms is 107 meters and Cluny was 187 meters long. So it's, in the future, we also intend to do recordings then for Cluny. I mentioned this by recording maybe in a virtual model of Cluny 3. That's the third stage of Cluny. It was built 3 times, and this is the biggest one, where there are already reconstructions by a Spanish team. And of course also in the already mentioned St. Peter and Paul of Hirsau, where we already have also a point cloud of the Hirsau church, and this was highly influenced by Cluny Hirsau, but nevertheless did its own development. Virtual reconstructions of these churches shall help to reveal the character of their acoustics. So we hope to be able to describe the difference in sound concepts, for example, of a Benedictine church of St. Gall, on the left, Cluny and Hirsau, and a Cistercian church in the 9th and 12th century. The innovative character of the research project consists in the combination of musicological, liturgical, and ritual studies with techniques of digital humanities. The main difference to former projects in this area, as for example the project on music in Renaissance Venice conducted by Deborah Howard in 2009. This is the website which is still on, and Deborah Howard did a similar research project with the churches of Renaissance Venice. And they also made a reconstruction of an oratorio in Venice, which was destroyed. But they didn't do recording in real time with the reconstructed acoustics. And the second project is a project conducted at Stanford University from Bisera Penceva with Ensemble Capella Romana performing with the virtual sound of the Hagia Sophia for Byzantine chant. The main difference to our project, will be that the singers will hear the virtual reconstructed sound in real time and perform in a visual 3D space at the same time, and therefore, as we hope and believe, will react and behave in a more realistic way. And of course, the project, as you can imagine, have many questions and challenges, and this is my last slide. So among them are simply how close can virtual acoustics match real acoustics? How natural will the singers feel in the virtual space in acoustic? And last but not least, and now this is for the organizers of concerts, could we imagine a performance for audience? How will this be set up in such an environment? Could we imagine a concert with singers performing in a virtual optical and acoustical space and using 3D surround technology with 3D classes for singers and audience alike? So I end my paper with these questions because there are more questions than answers still, and I could only describe you the project as a current ongoing work in progress. I can't give you final results, maybe next year when we did the recording in the virtual space. But at least I could present you some questions on the questions of academic research, of performance practice, and festival design, maybe, which we could expect in the future. And probably we will hear something from Ambrose Field, which who, if I heard correctly, has already some experience with performances like this. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. This was very informative, completely new to me. I'm sure to many of you too. I wonder, how do different acoustics, because you've experimented with this model yourself, right? So how did that experience change your performance practice, if it changed it in any way?
Yeah. Well, Justin, to give an example from yesterday, it was clearly, and I was asked by several people which was for the singers the more comfortable acoustic, and it was clearly the second position, because it was much easier to sing there, because the singers could hear each other better. It was much more difficult in the wide open space of the first position. Both were very beautiful for us for singing, but we had much more time to accommodate to the first acoustic, which would perhaps come closer to Cluny, for example, but which would be even bigger. So it's really Also a question, of course, of having experience with the room. So as said, we had long time, enough long time, but you can't, of course, rehearse the whole night. So we did 2 hours or something, and then we were already a little bit better also in the first position. Yeah. So this is a first result and impact which is totally clear on the spot, on the performers. The question, of course, is, and what we want to think about, which is not very easy to find out what, this is not by incident, but this was a deliberated result of the architecture. And what is the connection? Why did they build a Cistercian church like this and not other way around? And why was Cluny built like this, which might sound for our ears not clear, or the text is not understandable, but maybe these are not the right questions. So, and it affects tempo, of course. So the first part was, even if we were permitted to do an XL version, it even got longer than we had measured, because we had to sing slower. Yeah. And if you have several pieces, it gets easily 5-10 minutes longer if you do every piece longer. In the second space, we could, in the West Choir, we could perform more condensed and more quickly. So these are things we immediately experience. Or if you perform in the Cluny-like space, the big super melisma at the end of Cluny, maybe you heard it with the, I think you heard it with the, gave us the idea of making this throne version there at the end, because it's like it was written in mind having an acoustic that supports certain levels of, because it is transposed 3 times a fourth upward. So, and this, if you sing it, it almost automatically is the result. So we reinforced it a little bit, but and so this may be also some impact you can really experience.
Have you tried with these virtual reconstructions of, let's say, spaces that no longer exist, to try create more acoustic versions of the same space? Because I imagine that the interiors of churches must have changed during the centuries. So maybe today it doesn't, like even the Worms Cathedral doesn't necessarily sound the same it did. I don't know which century.
We have, as to now, we don't have experience, because we only will perform next year in the virtual space. But as I mentioned, the first thing we want to try out is to change the ceiling, because the original Moderator church, the ceiling was later modified. That's the only thing which is not original. They wanted to have this Gothic ceiling. And maybe our beautiful sound, which we like so much at Maulbronn, it could disappear a little bit, because the wooden flat ceiling, and this can be done easily in the architectural virtual model. But we have not much experience how this really affects singing. And also singers who are not used to perform in a virtual space. That will be really a challenge, which we didn't before. Because you have to be accommodate to hearing you only by headphones. Yes. And the others also, and seeing a 3D space. So that will be a challenge, but we want to try it, what comes out. And I think it is not to replace, so to say, historical performance practice by digital techniques. It's a new technique which is used as before as reconstructing instruments. It's more or less also all about reconstruction, but we use the technical means of today. Yeah. Because I presented this in Utrecht 2 years ago at a conference there, the future of early music. And there were people there saying, oh, has nothing to do with early music anymore. Yeah, you can't perform with technique on the stage. Yeah. And well, I said, if you perform with perfect reconstructed instruments in a totally wrong room, that's equally not historically informed. So.
Do you hope this will help you understand the compositional techniques of chant better?
Hopefully, yeah. I think, and we hope so. Yeah. That we know more about why it was composed like this. Yeah.
Does anyone else have a question, perhaps? Yes, please.
So, if I understand correctly, in the virtual recording, they're wearing the headsets.
Yeah.
They hear each other.
Yeah.
In the virtual acoustic.
Yeah.
But they're also wearing the 3D.
Intersect. We have two phases. The first is without optical, and the second phase is in the 3D space.
So then they see
yeah.
the virtual
yeah.
church. Do you think the fact that they see the virtual church will affect the way they sing?
I think so.
Okay. If I see a huge space
yeah.
in front of me, it might change my
yeah.
vocality than if I know I'm in a studio.
Yeah.
And if I don't see that.
I have no experience, but I think it is from my own experience that if I'm standing in this room and I'm singing and only thinking and hearing an acoustic, but if I see it also, I think I will react and sing another way.
And can they see their colleagues as well?
Yeah, they can see the colleagues. Okay. Yeah.
So there's a complete perception of reality enhanced by the virtual.
Yeah. And they can also, later on, if it is recorded once virtually, you can position the singers where you want to without having human beings there. As you can pick a monk and set it there.
If you wanted to create the virtual reality of 400 monks in Cluny, could you multiply them with slight variations programmed in so that you get 400?
We have in this research project a colleague, there are other disciplines, there's Japanology also, and he wants to do a similar research on the rituals in very ancient Buddhistic temples, where there are recordings that there are in one of those temples in a ritual 1,000 monks. And he asked the same question if they could do it with 2 and then replicate to thousands, and theoretically the acoustical said it's possible. I don't know what the real result would be, but
you'd have to have a software that can alter the voice in all different parameters.
Yeah.
Age. Breath control. Because you can tell when it's the same singer being multiplied 100 times, it sounds like one person.
I don't know if this really. I haven't heard it. It's completely new, and we will see how it works and how it will be. But I think I was convinced to do it at the point when I was assured that it is now possible to hear the virtual acoustic in real time. Because before this technique is to make an anechoic recording and afterwards put a hall or something on it. That's a long time known. But post-production. But then I always said no. Then we have to sing in a chamber like this, and of course singers will totally different because they have no acoustic. And now, if they say the technicians say you can hear it without any latence. You hear it really when singing. You hear it like it sounded in the church. So there is a possibility that you sing also like being there.
Will each singer have one microphone, or will there be multiple levels of microphones?
I think each singer will have one, and it will be recorded by this many array of microphones, so that you have. But I have to leave all this and trust my colleagues from technical acoustics, because I have no idea about this work. And we have to trust them, but they are a world-leading center, so.
One can't do everything.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Maybe just add
Yeah.
In Leuven, and they have built a room that does that.
Okay.
So the acoustic comes back to you right away.
Yeah.
So you sing in a space, not with headphones, but with actual space. But the room is quite small.
Yeah.
So they are also adding or working on adding.
Yeah.
Well, goggles basically.
Yeah.
So you can see the room, because they have found that the singers who sing the polyphony you get on the screens.
Yeah.
They have a mismatch between what they hear and what they see.
That shouldn't be. Yeah.
So it's you can see there's various people working on this.
Yeah.
And just seeing what happens.
It's a little bit in the air. I think there are several projects emerging. I think it's due to the technology advances, because before it was simply not possible and cheap, and otherwise it wouldn't work. So.
You also had a question.
I guess even when you do technology with your music, it's easier to get money nowadays. Well, that's my experience. But I wanted to say something else. When I'm singing in my bathroom,
Yeah.
I don't sing at 440 hertz,
Yeah.
but I'm singing at bathroom pitch.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean. Each
Yeah.
room has its own
Yeah.
diapers on.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I would be very intrigued to see if it would be possible virtually
Yeah.
to have this connection with.
There could be.
This
Yeah.
this will enhance this particular note, so that's the pitch, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. That could be also an interesting answer to the question often asked, what is the pitch? So when I often say it's practically, it was certainly a tradition in the monastery, kept by the cantor also, and this probably related to the architecture or.
Yes, please.
There was something similar done by Eric Whittaker some years ago. He did a virtual choir with singers from all over the world. He brought it together by computer.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the same.
It's not the
It's just a collage of live streams.
But how did they put them together then?
Just mixing.
On a click. They recorded it on a click.
Okay.
So it's just a single voice, and then Eric put it all together and mixed it up. So this was the idea of the virtual choir in internet, but there was no live directly acoustic on the singer's ear. So that's what's your challenge is. He was singing in isolation. Yes.
Do you think that this could then, whatever results this research brings at the end, this could go further in constructing buildings with this specific acoustic? Modern performance spaces, so not churches as we use today, but completely.
Well, I can only say actually the partners, the University of Aachen, they have normally, of course, no interest in any music or historical performance. They earn their money by doing such acoustical measurement for city development or building tubes, and or a open space somewhere in the city. So but new for them this is their research interest in this project, because they now, as to now, they only have experience with one, for example, one performer in this area, but they never did it with several people or something like this. And this is a whole new, also a research question, how to do it with more people there in, how is the interaction, how can they, and perhaps the results of this could also help them to reconstruct more better acoustic spaces, like the famous Elbphilharmonie or something. I don't know if it's necessary. We won't practically reconstruct a new cathedral. In fact, there is, as you might know, at Meßkirch in southwest Germany, they have a large project, the Campus Galli, where they rebuilt in reality, like it's a sister project to Guédelon, and they rebuilt the whole St. Galla cloister plan in reality, from scratch. They only using medieval, and they now finished only the wooden church, which was in every monastery the first church. And we want to go there recently to hear, maybe it was interesting to make something in such a church, because this is, as we often forget, for 40 years, which it has time to build a large monastery church. They had only a wooden church, and they were singing there for 40 years. So in 40 years, you can come to Meßkirchen, perhaps, and experience the real Klosterplan church there. But this is too long to wait. So, so maybe we are quicker, but...
Yes, please. Thank you for this extremely fascinating presentation. I have two questions, ideas, I don't know, that could be coming out of this. One on the sense that today also reproducing recordings is possible to do it while new recording technology is with this sort of human head type of listening in the space, and there's technology to reproduce that as well. How this could affect, and eventually these festivals, early music festivals that are place-centered or location-centered, could even, for people that I relate to, coming from a place that in South America, where we just dream of the cultural heritage that we so much cherish through also an imported tradition or so on, or even in North America, different places in the world where there's really this ambition to, or desire to have the experience that people get to have here. And if in the future we're not going to be using that many airplanes for several reasons, I mean, just the fact of being able to, like the Met Museum, you have it at the at your cinema next door. You could have X festival being reproduced not only in video, but with this physical sensation. And on the other hand, an aspect of what this could give to performance, as you say, a part of your work, of if you have considered bringing different aesthetics, performance aesthetics, into the same experiment, to see how each aesthetic, let's say ensemble organum and, and something completely different, which have all different reasons to do what they do, but how they could be relating and reacting to this in real life, and how we could also add another parameter of comparison to those things.
That's true. Of course, this would now be only with my ensemble and my singers, and we have a certain tradition, and we are a certain way to sing, and we are not monks of the 12th century, so maybe an ensemble singing in a different way would have other experiences. That's true. That would be also interesting to hear how it responds by different singers, singing traditions. I think the main idea is that we should try to incorporate or think about how we incorporate and use the technical evolution in our evolution of early music, not only Middle Ages, but also in festival design, not by, as Ben mentioned, because they're always looking at the screens. Well, they would have their screens too, but hopefully by emphasizing their experience, not by being distracted, hopefully. And there are several means which we now can't predict, but I think the way is open to that, so we should think about this also.
Any other questions? Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.